More than 1,400 British Columbians have lost their lives to COVID-19 since this pandemic began. But as shocking as that figure is, it is actually less than the total for another epidemic sweeping the province. And with that, we mean illicit drug overdoses. The vast majority involving opioids like fentanyl and heroin. And new figures released just this week, well, it shows BC's deadliest February on record for fatal overdoses, 155 in all. But that is only one jaw-dropping number. The province's coroner service also says it is the 11th straight month of 100 drug deaths or more. Now, British Columbia did declare a public emergency relating to its opioid crisis back in April 2016, but critics accuse governments and health officials at all levels of still not doing enough. So to talk about this, we've invited to the program today Garth Mullins. He's an activist and host of the podcast Crackdown. He joins us right now in Vancouver. So Garth, thank you for being with us today.
Hey, Michael, thanks for having me.
So, for people who don't know, you've been on the front lines, and when the coroner's office announces a number of dead, from what I've been reading, these are not just numbers for you. Many of these numbers represent people who you knew in life. So what is it like for you to hear a record has been broken when it comes to opioid deaths in British Columbia?
I mean, we just have been losing people from my community of friends and colleagues for years now, every month. I was a drug user, a heroin user all the way through the last overdose crisis, and I'm on methadone now, but it seems like it's never stopped. We're constantly planning a memorial for somebody. So it's heartbreaking. You find yourself in a constant state of mourning, and the ghosts of people who shouldn't have gone are never far.
And how frustrating is it then to have a government declare a crisis back in 2016 and still be facing a crisis on the ground when it comes to overdose deaths?
I mean, drug policy in British Columbia is stuck like the container ship Ever Given is stuck in the Suez Canal. It's just jammed there. And the pilot of this drug policy, at least in British Columbia, is Premier John Horgan. So it's his fault that we're stuck like this. It's his lack of courage to actually make the moves that have been known for at least a generation. Making those moves could end the overdose crisis. He's not doing it. We're stuck. And so activists like the group I'm a part of, the Vancouver Area Network of Drug Users, are like that tiny excavator down by the bow of that giant ship of government that's stuck obstructing the channel. And we're just trying to dig our way out of this, but we're just like in the Suez Canal, kind of overwhelmed.
So you mentioned policies that could help. What exactly, in your mind, would help alleviate, tackle the crisis as we see it right now?
People are dying from a contaminated drug supply, right? And this is just like alcohol prohibition. People drank beer, alcohol became illegal, moonshine became the thing that was available because it was smaller, bigger bang for the buck, easier to transport around, to sneak around from the cops. Drugs is like that too, except for it's a longer prohibition period. 1908, everyone was just smoking opium. Then became illegal. Heroin, then injecting heroin, eventually China White, fentanyl, carfentanil, and here we are today. It's like an arms race. So stopping that by just prescribing straight across pharmaceutical versions of the things that people are doing on the street. So instead of a unknown or potentially lethal dose of a street drug, people get an entirely known pharmaceutical version. Instead of heroin from the street, diacetylmorphine. It's like if you walked into a bar and ordered a drink and you had no idea whether it was a Coors Light or a pint of tequila. You got to know how strong it is and what you're drinking.
Mm-hmm. Now, the BC Premier, in mentioning John Horgan there, he, along with the Vancouver Mayor Kennedy Stewart, they have been asking the federal government for an exemption that would allow for the decriminalization of drug possession for personal use. The province also saying it's working to add more treatment and recovery options. Is that the sign of a premier that's not moving on this issue?
No, I mean, this is such a classic Canadian thing to do, is for someone to ask another level of government to do something. The municipal governments and provincial governments have a great deal of control over what the police do in their provinces, in their jurisdictions. They provide the budgets. We've asked both of those governments to say, just don't apportion any more budget for police to chase around and jail drug users. That's decriminalization overnight. They have seen those suggestions, and not just from me, from people like the top of the public health here. Bonnie Henry has suggested the same thing. They won't do it. and is, recovery bed announcements. They're tiny, but also, I've gone through the abstinence 12-step programs myself, and they always tell you, if you have the opioid use disorder that's chronic, that's relapsing, keep coming back, you'll fail, you'll use, you'll slip up, you'll come back. Well, when the drugs are deadly, we don't have time for that years-long journey because you'll die on the way. We need something that works now, and that is safe supply. That's the pharmaceutical version I was telling you about.
Mm-hmm. There will be people, and I realize this goes back to the basics of this argument, this debate. There will be people that hear safe supply and think that's doing nothing to counter addiction, which they see as the root problem. What do you say to that?
They're wrong. They're just wrong. Come and live the life. Addiction is not the root problem here. Right? Like plenty of drugs other than opioids that are prescribed to people, you can't stop. Like if you're taking SSRIs or something like that, you can't just stop that. People get wired, people get dependent on pharmaceutical drugs. That's not what's killing people. Addiction isn't the problem. Addiction isn't what's killing people. What's killing people is prohibition. The most dangerous thing about drugs in Canada is that they're illegal. So it's like you got to aim yourself at the not what molecule is in the bloodstream of someone problem. You got to aim, is there oxygen in their lungs problem? So it's a not are you addicted problem, it's are you dead problem. And that's where I'm aiming my work.
Gareth Mullins, thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, Michael.